Hello and welcome to your favorite YouTube channel, CloudExpert Solutions, and welcome back to AWS Certified Solution Architect Associate Certification Bootcamp. Today we are diving deep into Amazon S3 Object Replication feature. In this module, we'll start with S3 lifecycle rules, Amazon S3 automated storage object transition between storage classes. Then we'll dive into S3 versioning for data protection. And finally, we will explore S3 object replication for high availability and disaster recovery. On behalf of the CloudExpert Solutions team, I would like to thank you for joining us and selecting this bootcamp. Let's get started. We will start with S3 object versioning. S3 versioning is a critical feature for data protection. When you enable versioning on a bucket, it saves multiple versions of object, creating a history of every change. Let's understand using a diagram. Here we have one S3 bucket and the bucket name is CloudExpert Solutions bucket. When you are creating the first object, it is going to provide a key ID. Let's assume it is 123. Then if you are going to add the same object one more time, you can see we are going to have two versions of the same object. Although in the S3 UI, you are going to see only one object, but behind the scene it will have two versions and it is going to maintain the older version as well as the new version. We have understood the concept from the diagram. Now let's understand how it works internally. When you upload a new object with the same name, a new version is created and the old version is not deleted. It just becomes a non-current version. Each object will have an unique ID. And when you delete an object, S3 does not actually delete it. S3 will add a special delete marker which becomes the new current version and the older object version will still there and it can be restored. This feature is your lifeline against accidental overwrites or deletion of any object. S3 versioning is also a prerequisite for other S3 features like when you want to apply the replication of the bucket. We are going to cover and we have dedicated slides for that. For the AWS certification, please remember the concept that if you have an existing object in the bucket before you enable the version, then the existing object will have a null version ID. AWS loves to test and trick candidates with these concepts. So please remember this for the certification exam. Now let's review S3 object replication. With object replication, you can automatically copy objects from a source bucket to a destination bucket, and this is an asynchronous process and it happens shortly after the object is written to the source bucket. There are two main types of S3 replication. The first one is cross-region replication or CRR. Using this feature, you can copy objects to a bucket in a different AWS region, and you can use this for disaster recovery or to place data closer to your global user to reduce latency or to satisfy compliance rules that requires data to be stored geographically far apart. Here is an example of S3 cross-region replication. We have our source bucket in US East 1 or Northern Virginia and destination bucket in US West 1. If you have replication configured between these two buckets, then whenever you are going to create any object in the source bucket, that object will be automatically copied or replicated to destination bucket. And this is happening across AWS regions. That is why it is called cross-region replication. There is another one option. It's called same region replication or SRR, where you copy objects to a bucket in the same AWS region. And this is perfect for any log aggregation or keeping multiple copies of data in different accounts within the same region for any compliance reason. Here is a diagram to explain the same thing. The underlying concept is same. It only varies based on the source and the destination bucket location. You must remember to configure S3 object replication, both the source and the destination bucket must have versioning enabled such that the replication can work. And now let's quickly review the use cases. To start with disaster recovery, maybe your primary region is down and if you have a replicated copy in your other region, then you can use that copy for your disaster recovery. You can also configure for low latency. As an example, if you have users in Europe and they can access data from a local S3 bucket, which will dramatically improve their experience. If you have any regulatory requirement which mandates you to maintain multiple copies of the data within same region or in a different region for disaster recovery, then also you can use this feature. And last but not least, you can use for analytics. All your log files from different departments or different AWS accounts can be replicated to a single bucket for easy data analytics purpose. And for the certification, you must remember these replication behaviors. The first one, when you delete an object without specifying a version ID, then S3 will add a delete marker to the object, and S3 replication can be configured to replicate this delete marker to the destination bucket. That means if you are simply deleting the object, then that delete will be replicated. However, if you are deleting a specific object version, that means when you are deleting the object, you are specifying a version ID, then that delete will not be replicated to your destination bucket by default, and this feature to protect your data from any accidental deletion. Now a very common exam topic on S3 object replication, which is a chain replication. You cannot chain any standard S3 replication from bucket A to B and then from B to C, because standard replication does not replicate a replica object. Now let's understand with an example. Let's assume you have bucket A, bucket B and bucket C. You have replication rule between bucket A and bucket B, and then you have replication rule between bucket B and bucket C. Now if you copy any object to bucket A, due to this replication rule, the object will be copied to bucket B, but that same object will never be copied to bucket C, although you have a replication setup between bucket B and bucket C. This is called the chain replication, and S3 does not support any chain replication. Then what is the option you have if you need? You must set two separate replication rules for this case, and this is an example. If you have any requirement, then you have to set your first replication rule between bucket A and bucket B, and then a second rule between bucket A and bucket C. Whenever you are going to copy any object to bucket A, that object will be replicated to bucket B, and then because of the second replication rule, the same object will be copied to bucket C. But any object from bucket B to bucket C will not be copied. Now let's review some common troubleshooting scenarios you might encounter during your AWS certification or your day-to-day work. If you are facing any replication issues between the buckets, that means you have replication rule but the objects are not replicating, then first you should check the bucket policy of the destination bucket. If the bucket policy allowing the source bucket to replicate object or not, then you should check the versioning must be enabled on the source and the destination bucket. And then you have to check the object, because replication rules only applies to newly updated object. If the object was available before you have enabled the replication, those objects will not be replicated by default. If your current replication is in a chain replication, then you have to create two separate rules as we have discussed. Now let's go back to AWS Management Console and let's see the replication rules. Back to my AWS Management Console, I'll go back to my bucket. For replication rule, I'll go to Management. The second option is replication rule. I'll create replication rule. And before enabling, I need to enable the bucket versioning. So let's go back and enable bucket versioning first. I'll go to Properties. The first option is bucket versioning. I'll edit and I will enable bucket versioning. I'll do the same thing for my second bucket, and for this I'm going to use AWS Terraform script library. Although I have some files here, I'll go to Properties, Versioning, I'll edit, I'll enable bucket versioning. Now for both my buckets, versioning has been enabled. Now let's go back to my source bucket. This object was available before I enable version. So let's go and check the version ID. If I go to version, you can see the version ID is null here. I'll go to Management. From the replication rules, I'll create replication rule. I have used CS demo replication rule as the replication rule name. Now you need to choose whether the rule will be enabled or disabled when created. I want enable. Why not? The source bucket, this is my source bucket, source region. You can choose the rule scope, limit the scope to using one or more filter. I don't want any filter, I want for all objects in my bucket. I have to choose the destination bucket. Either you can choose the bucket in this account or in another one account. I am going to use the same account, and now let's browse S3 and I am going to choose AWS Terraform script library. I have selected the destination bucket. For the IAM rule, I do not have an existing rule. I am going to create the rule. I do not want any encryption setting. Additional replication, we discussed about the delete marker. If you are selecting, then any delete operation in the source bucket will be replicated to the destination bucket. For this demo, I do not want, and now you can save that rule. Now it is saying, do you want to replicate the existing object? I already have one object and it is going to replicate this object to my destination bucket, and let's submit. Here is my replication rule. Now let's go back to my source bucket. Now let's upload the same object one more time in this bucket and we'll check the version ID. I'll upload, add file. I have selected the file and let's upload. Okay, the file has been uploaded successfully. Let's close it. Now let's go to the object and let's go to version. Here you can see the initial version was null and then this is the current version. I have the version ID, unique number. Now let's go back to our destination bucket and let's check the object. Since this replication is asynchronous, it may take some time. Maybe I'll refresh and I'll go to this object and here you go. I have this object replicated here. Let's click it and let's review the version. You can see this is the current version. It has been replicated. Now let's go back to our source bucket and let's try to delete this object. I'll select this object, I'll delete. I'll confirm deletion and delete object. Close. You can see the object is not visible in the S3 UI. It's actually hidden. Now to see this version, you need to toggle this show versions. And here you can see this is the current version of the object, which is a delete marker. Our previous version was null. Then we have the version ID. Now what we can do, we can select and we can delete a specific version. If we are going to delete this delete marker, then this version will be again visible. Before deleting this delete marker, let's go back to our destination bucket and let's see if the delete marker has replicated or not. It should not. I still have this object. I'll show version. For this object, I still have the current version. Let's go back to my source bucket. I'll show versions. I'll select this delete marker and I'm going to delete. I'll confirm deletion. So I have deleted the delete marker. Now I have two versions, the null and the original. I will toggle the show version. The object is back again. When you have versioning enabled in your S3 bucket and if you are going to delete any object, it is going to simply hide that object with a delete marker. That is not actually deleting that object. I do not need that replication rule. So I'll go ahead and delete that replication rule. I'll select this and I'm going to delete this replication rule. Once you have enabled any bucket versioning, you won't be able to disable that. Rather, you will be able to suspend that version. So I'm going to acknowledge this and I'm going to save. Now the bucket versioning is suspended for this bucket. That wraps up this module. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more AWS exam preparation courses and cloud certification bootcamps. Got questions or feedback? Drop them in the comment. We love to hear from you. Thanks for learning with us at CloudExpert Solutions. You are now one step closer to crushing your exam. See you in the next module.